Example 7. We are given that WX is congruent to ZV, XY is congruent to VY, WY is congruent to ZY, and we know that angle X and angle V are right angles. And we have to prove that triangle WXY is congruent to triangle ZVY. So, make sure you put your work, make sure you put your reasons. And again, step 1 is always going to be our given, or at least part of our given. In this case, if you notice your given, we're trying to prove that two triangles are congruent, and they already told us that all 3 sides are congruent. That's great because half of our proof is done, so I'm just going to record it in the given. So WX is congruent to ZV, XY is congruent to VY, and WY is congruent to ZY. So half of your proof is done. We already know that all the sides are congruent. Now we have to move on and start looking at the angles. Well, they told us something in the given about 2 of the angles. So I'm just going to keep this with the same step, and I'm going to say that angle X and angle V are right angles. And I'm just going to leave that under the given, because then I'm going to use that for step 2. We're trying to prove that all the angles are congruent. The fact that angle X and angle V are right angles, well, we know that that means they're congruent, but you have to actually state that, because it didn't state that they're congruent, it stated that they were right. So the next thing I'm going to say is I'm going to say angle X is congruent to angle V, and the reason is that all right angles are congruent. Because all right angles are equal to 90 degrees, and everything that's equal to 90 degrees is equal to itself. Step 3, we have 2 more angles we have to prove. So I'm going to look right here, and I'm going to look right here. So those 2 are vertical angles, they're opposite each other. So I'm going to say angle WYX is congruent to angle VYZ, and the reason there is because they're vertical. So now we have 2 angles are congruent. The last one I need is angle W and angle Z. So I'd probably try to be looking if I had parallel lines, because they might be alternate interior, but there's nowhere on the picture that marks the lines as parallel, so I can't use that. But I do already know that 2 angles are congruent from step 2 and 3. So if I know 2 angles are congruent, then by the third angles theorem, I can conclude that the third angle is congruent. So angle W is congruent to angle Z, and that is the third angles theorem. So now I've shown in step 1, all 3 sides are congruent. In steps 2, 3, and 4, all 3 angles are congruent. So now in step 5, we can conclude that triangle WXY is congruent to triangle ZVY, and the reason is all corresponding parts are congruent.